Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Indira, and today I'm joined by Amy-Eloise Neale. She's been to a range of major championships, including World Championships and the 2021 Tokyo Olympic Games. Amy's a phenomenal athlete and's been competing at high level from her youth years. She started her early athletic career in the States and moved to the UK afterwards. In this episode, she shares her journey through the sport to the point she's at now, including some discussion around her experience of an eating disorder. Lots to learn from and be inspired from in this episode. As always, please be sure to give the show a rating and review if you've been enjoying it. Really helps give credibility to the podcast so I can keep bringing you guys the guests you want to hear from. Okay, let's get to it. Hi, Amy, how are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well. I'm a bit tired from all my mileage at the moment, but training's been going well. So, all good here.
Oh, that's always good to hear. And what kind of mileage have you been churning out recently?
Well, I'm in a half marathon block at the moment. So, so this week's going to be about 95. So it's been a bit up and down. I was a bit ill last week as well, so it came down again, but now we're bringing it back up. So, kind of varies from week to week, but that's kind of my 85 to 95 is kind of my sweet spot normally.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better and rather you than me. So let's get into this. Can you briefly introduce yourself, as an athlete?
Yeah, so I started running when I was really young. I went to my first athletics night when I was about 6, I think, and kind of stuck with it. Got quite serious about it from an early age, all through school, and I've been basically gradually moved up in distance until the last few years. I've mostly focused on the 5 and the 10, and then now moving into the roads. So a lot more focus on that 10K, half marathon, and hopefully a marathon if all goes well. So it's been a bit of a transition, just gradually climbing up in distance here. But it's been fun, going through kind of the different phases and then being ready for a new challenge again.
Yeah, I guess it's nice to keep things fresh. Certainly sounds like a new challenge for sure. And for you so far, what would you say, off the top of your head, maybe a sentence or so, the most significant running moment for you so far?
Um, there's so many. I think it's really hard to pinpoint it. I think what comes to mind, the most career defining one, is probably running in Tokyo, making my Olympic team. That obviously is I'm never going to forget that. But I think the most important one for me was Commonwealth, actually, in Birmingham, in 2022, because I bounced back from a bad World Championships a couple of weeks before. Had got heat exhaustion and just it obviously did not go well and was far below what I wanted to do. And then being able to bounce back and yes, I fell just short of medal and I got 4th in the end, but I came out of it with a PB, and it was just a moment of being able to come back from such a bad performance and then having one of the best performances of my life was a really significant moment for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, that was a 14:56, by the way, guys. So, some pretty speedy stuff there. And for you, what's the next biggest goal or thing that you're hoping to achieve?
This has changed a lot because, like I said, I've decided to move to the roads now. I need a new challenge, and I think I've spent a long time on the track. Like I said, I've done this since I was 6, and I think I was ready for a change. And obviously, the landscape of running has just changed a lot since I went professionally, but obviously long before that as well. The type of racing has just changed. So for me, it's more about being able to just choose the races that I really want to do and making space for that, instead of having a schedule that's kind of dictated by selectors and all sorts. So it's more about figuring out what I'm really enjoying and just racing some really fast courses, but also racing some just really hard courses where I want to just focus on placing as high as I can. The big goal going forward is I do tentatively have a marathon in mind for next year, but obviously it's a big step forward, so that might be pushed back. I'm not sure. but kind of going with that, that's the big goal. But on my way there, obviously, I really want to get some really good half marathons in, 10Ks. Like, I know I have so much to give the sport still. It's just going to look a little different than it might have like the past few years. But yeah, it's more, I think I'm giving myself permission to let it kind of unfold how it is. Like, obviously, anybody thinks of like the next Olympic cycle. We all do. That's what one of the reasons we do this. So yes, I think, oh, if I am able to be successful in the marathon, like, yes, that is something that I would kind of, I do have LA in the back of my head, but kind of not putting pressure on it, and just knowing that there's so many other prestigious road races that like are amazing experiences and really valuable and like inspire a lot of people. I think that's the exciting thing about the roads, is there's almost so much to focus on each year. And it can change from year to year, and you can kind of get all the there's just so many bucket list races that I want to do. So yeah, it's hard, it's a hard one to answer, because I think going away in the track, you almost have very specific time goals, very specific place goals, and because I'm kind of embarking on something new, I don't have those yet.
Yeah. No, that sounds really cool. And I mean, yeah, it's really interesting what we're saying, sort of about having a bit more autonomy, having kind of selectors being a factor in, maybe not knowing what you do. And yeah, it sounds really exciting moving forwards. And definitely, I mean, yeah, you can't control life. So I think, working with where life takes you is such a good approach. And, finally, two more questions kind of wrap this off. For you, what's the number one piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self?
There's so many. I think classic one is like appreciating that fuel is fuel, and kind of not fighting your body in a way, and like working with your body. I think like many athletes, I've gone through periods where I struggled um, on the fueling side of things, and I think I've lost years in the sport doing that. So that's a big one. But I think kind of the biggest one that I see right now, especially as I kind of moved away from the track, is I think there were so many times in my career where I don't think I necessarily appreciated what I had when I had it, because we always want to do the best. Like, what, even if we've given our best, we always want more. We're always a bit unsatisfied, and so then you walk away from these championships sometimes not really appreciating the moment and soaking it in, because you're always thinking of the next one, and you always assume that you have another one. It's one of the things that have been getting me riled up a bit the past couple of weeks, is people keep saying, "Oh, my Olympic debut," and I'm like, you don't know if you've got another one. You're at the Olympics. It might not be just a debut. It might be your last as well. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, because there's so many times you can just let all those moments pass you by, and then you realize you're like, oh, maybe I don't have another one, and I hope I do, but what if I don't? And what if I wasted that moment and didn't soak it in as much as I could? And I think that kind of applies through all levels of sport as well. I'm not just talking about major championships, but also just like the most memorable races that you do, even like on the domestic and county scale as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so many wise words there, food is fuel and appreciating the moment. Actually, that's something I think I've noticed this Olympics. So many athletes in their post interviews, they get a silver medal, which is an incredible achievement. It's like, this is just the beginning, or this is just the start, or there's more to come. And it's like, but the moment itself is amazing. Yeah, that really is, something that is quite a point. And finally, for you, what's your most controversial take on something athletics related that you've seen this Olympics?
I'm not. I don't think this is that controversial. I just think there was a lot of people who deserved to be there that weren't there. Um, I don't think that's that controversial. I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. And I think that's something that's really got to change. If you look at the new standards for even next year in Tokyo, there's a possibility that we will just take no one in any event, in certain events, just because the standards are so high. Like, hopefully we do, and I believe we have a lot of women who are capable of running those times. But if the policies don't change, it kind of risks killing the endurance side of things. Just because the averages, obviously, they take those times from, there's not that many Europeans in those times, in those time frames. So yeah, running like 30-20, for instance, in the 10K, it's like, yes, we have people that are capable of doing that, but and that you have to get it right, and you have to get it right almost months and months in advance, to the point where then on the day when the championship come around, you can't actually run your best. So I think the policies need to change, but I don't think that's that necessarily that controversial.
Yeah, no, definitely that really is something that does need more examination. And yeah, there's been a lot of noise around that for sure. Okay, so let's turn this on to you and your story. Let's take it back to the start. It seems that you started out in the States. Can you sort of talk us through, your initial experience and if that was the case?
Yeah, so I moved to the US because my dad's job when I was little. So yeah, that's where I went to my first athletics night, and I just took to it quite well. I think when you're little, it's like you kind of do the things that you're good at, the things that attract you, and it's like quite fun to like beat the boys, and you're running down like on the playground and things, and like it's just when you like I was the fastest one, and I think I really grasped onto that, and um, it was really the only sport that I was ever really interested in. Um, but yeah, so I did it all through school, high school. High school sports are really big in the US, um, and ended up being able to get a scholarship to university as well. So I was in the NCAA system out there, and then that's kind of what um, kicked off my pro career, because I went after placed second at NCAA's in cross country. It's kind of what caught the attention of some sponsors and the coach that I ended up working with. So yeah, and then I ended up signing with Reebok, ran out in Virginia for a few years before moving back to the UK. And now, like, obviously, like to switch coaches, I'm sponsored by On now. So my setup has changed quite a few times. Um, but yeah, I think like training in the US and stuff isn't right for everyone, and it was definitely like I think my decisions are what got me to where I am. So like I definitely don't regret any of those decisions, but I do think it's a very like specific type of environment, um, and definitely had my ups and downs within that. But obviously, kind of everything's kind of worked out in the end, and now I'm in a setup that's like where I'm very happy, and um, like it feels very like good, both physically, mentally, emotionally. It's like all those things are kind of coming together, and I'm in like a very good setup now.
No, that's really great to hear. And, taking it back a bit when you talk about decisions, can you talk us through what some of these decisions were and maybe some of the impacts?
Yeah, I think the big one that kind of was a like change where my career went was when I went to decided to go the D1 route in university. Like obviously, um, it's a weird environment where it's just very intense, and I think I just burned the candle at both ends quite a lot of the time I was there, because I was just trying to do everything really really well. And I think that's like obviously I think that's a quality that a lot of runners have. You really want to be successful and don't want to settle for any less. And I think sometimes that can come at the expense of your well-being in a way. Um, but yeah, and then I think the biggest decision that like I'm so happy I made was making the decision to leave my setup out in Virginia, where there were certain things that like obviously I was successful there, and I improved throughout my time there, um, but I was definitely ready for some changes on the coaching front, and I was really like, or just realized I needed to prioritize like living in a place what makes me happy, like living near friends and family, all of those things that kind of outside of running that give me a lot of like kind of fill my cup. Um, so I think that was one of the decisions that was a really big step for me, and just in terms of like having longevity in the sport. Um, yeah, because I think at that point too, I was feeling a little bit burnt out in a way.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It definitely does sound like it can be a really intense process. And I know you mentioned starting somewhere else before you moved out to Virginia. So, which uni did you originally go to, and how did it manifest that you went out to Virginia?
Oh, sorry. So yeah, so I went to the University of Washington, and then I spent did my entire undergraduate there, started my master's there. I moved out to Virginia when I signed a pro contract with Reebok. Um, So then I joined the team out there. It was called the Reebok Boston Track Club, which is a bit of a misnomer since we actually trained in Virginia. But basically, it was the best offer I had at the time, coming out of university, contract wise, and it allowed me to run full time. And then so that's basically why I moved out there. And like I said, it did like I did see a lot of improvement through the time I was there. That was partially just because I was able to stay healthy. For the first time in a long time, I had a lot of in university. I had a lot of injuries, many of which were fueling related. So I think just finally kind of getting my body on track and was able to have a lot of consistency when I was over there. Yeah, and then left the group early in 2022. My contract went through the end of 2021, and then I decided to make a change.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. And just a quick question. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, Amy had a really, really successful kind of junior career. You know, she was competing at world championships, European championships as a junior, performing really well, especially in the steeplechase. Did you feel any sort of pressure then going into the collegiate system, knowing that you'd already achieved well on the world and European stage? And do you
I
think that
think,
that
yeah.
led to kind of some of that pressure, or I guess where you mentioned maybe not having the best well-being? Do you think that kind of contributed to that?
Yeah, I think I would when I was school. I mean, locally, I was one of the best. Uh, and obviously, like you said, I started running for international teams at quite a young age. And yeah, going into university, I had big goals, and I think then wanting to still be one of the best, but also then joining a team where there was women 4 or 5 years older than me, also on the same team that had they'd had years to kind of mature and increase their mileage and increase those intensity and all those things, and then kind of being thrown into that, and then wanting to from the get-go be able to do all those same things that maybe I wasn't ready for. Yeah, I think I definitely pushed it too soon, and like I said, I in those environments, I think they can be, depends on the team, but sometimes can be um, a little bit toxic in a way, on the fueling front. If whether that's, and I'm not saying every team is, and I'm not saying my team necessarily was at the time, but I think I was just a very vulnerable and athlete, in the sense of when I started overtraining from where I was, can you reach for the things that um, like kind of the easy answers in a way. And for me, it was the fueling, obviously, people, women's bodies do change quite a lot, through kind of their late teens. And I think that was tough for me in a way. I was never one of the smallest girls on the start line. And I think I started fighting that too much. And it kind of just, once you get into a cycle of an injury cycle and stuff as well, yeah, it was intense, and at times I was very unhappy, and it took me a while to figure out how to get myself out of that. But yeah, I think it's a very intense environment to be in very, very young. And I think that's where I say I don't think I'm old, in the sense I believe, I'm 29, and I have like I I believe I have a lot to give the sport. But in some ways, I feel like my racing age, my training age, is quite old, because I started quite intensely at a young age. I went to my first youth champs in, what was it, 2011?
Yeah, 2011
Um,
World
yeah,
Youth
so
Champs.
it's just it's just been a very long time in that kind of intense environment. I think it takes a while to kind of find your own way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's definitely a more unique experience. You know, not many people can say they've performed and competed at such a high level from such a young age for such a long time. And if we kind of talk a bit about this time at university, you know, maybe the environment feeling toxic to you, something that is commonly spoken about by a lot of athletes who've been through that collegiate system. Can you talk us through maybe a low moment in particular, or if anything kind of stands out to you that was maybe a particular trigger for that cycle of injury, those issues with underfueling, overtraining?
Yeah, I don't think there was necessarily a specific trigger for me. I think I was I was stressed, I was unhappy, I was taking on a lot of I took too much on, and I was trying to be perfect in kind of a world where that was objectively impossible to be perfect at everything. And I think that was how it manifested. And unfortunately for me, when I was struggling with eating disorders, it was not as kind of physically evident how much I was struggling. And I think for that reason, it took me quite a long time to get help. And then until the point where I realized I was like, I can't live like this anymore and I need this help. And that was like obviously a huge moment for me, in terms of just like, I hated it at the time, but I'm so glad I did it then. And looking back, I was like, um, it was a really important time for me. Um, but yeah, I don't think there was like a specific thing. I think it's just a very high pressured environment when you've been winning for so long and then you're expected to continue doing so, in like a changing context of your life. It's really kind of difficult to handle that sometimes. And um, like I said, I did get back to running at a high level again, but it took years of struggling with injuries and struggling, of just like having to prioritize like just my health and my well-being, both physically and mentally for a long time first. And at the time, it's not something that I spoke about at all at the time, and it's not something I spoke about until like a bit more recently, just because I feel like it is important. Um, but yeah, I think more athletes have struggled in that way more than you think, whether they've been like officially diagnosed or not. There's so many athletes out there, that are struggling to some degree at some point in their life. And I think I was one of the lucky ones that I was actually able to kind of get on top of it and bounce back and still compete at a high level and get my body on track in time. Um, but yeah, I think more people struggle than you think they do, and I think it's even harder these days with social media and the comparison. It's so much easier to make comparisons to what other people are doing. I think maybe that was a big bit for me. Is I went from training on my own quite a lot of the time to then being on a big group of people who I could compare to on a daily basis. And even though at that point, like social media wasn't as big of a thing, I don't think I even had an Instagram until first, second year of university. So it wasn't like such a big thing. But I think these days it's harder and harder and harder, especially for young athletes. If in their early teens, they're on the social media all the time. It's one of the reasons I don't really post about what my sessions are, because I don't want someone who's 14 to be comparing themselves to someone who's over twice their age. Um, but yeah, I think it's a hard when you want to be successful, it's really easy to kind of let things spiral.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's always great to hear these things from someone who's had your level of success, because it is something that affects so many women in the sport, so many girls. We lose so many people through not being able to bounce back. And, in particular, the points you make about around comparison and, maybe not feeling that you looked particularly like you were maybe that classic super anorexic girl on the start line or something, but yet it doesn't take away from the fact these same issues can be happening and be affecting athletic performance. And so let's focus on kind of the build back, because, for people listening who are maybe in a similar position and want to get out of that kind of dark tunnel, you mentioned how it took a few years. Can you talk us through what that process was like and maybe how you worked on your mindset during that time?
Yeah, I mean, it was horrible. I'll be honest. It was a horrible time, and I think I struggled a lot with it privately. And I think I shut a lot of my family and friends out and just dealt with it by myself, because that was how I kind of functioned. And I think people, even if they knew I had issues, they kind of were afraid to say anything, um, which I think is half the problem. People don't want to say anything because they don't want to do any harm, but by not saying anything, they're doing harm. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a sensitive subject, so I understand. But yeah, for me, it was the biggest one. I mean, I saw um, the therapy, nutrition. I was in like intensive outpatient care at the time, which was a big deal for me, and it was a really hard thing to. Um, that was a really hard thing for me to accept. Um, and as much as I hated it at the time, it was beneficial. I think half the problem is like, there's a lot of really smart women out there who we know what we're doing to our bodies. We know the science, we know the logic, we know logically we're not helping ourselves, but it's like this like addiction loop that you almost get into, and it's not about the logic anymore. The logic actually makes you feel guilty, because you're doing something stupid. You're not helping yourself, but it's just really hard to break that cycle. But yeah, so I think on the mental side of things, I had to do a lot of work, and on the physical side of things, I had to take things really slow. I think there's definitely times I almost like quit the sport. And then I remember, because I kept getting injuries and injuries and injuries, and then I reached a point where I thought, do I stop? And I said, okay, let's just try it one more time, because I don't want to be looking at results of things for the rest of my life, wondering what I could have done. And I kind of gave it one more try, and that was the time that stuck. Just took it really, really slow, and I think it's hard because you have to do a lot less than you want to do. And you just have to give your body a lot of time to heal and things. But yeah, I think being able to obtain that consistency was huge. And then also looking back, when I thought I was recovered, I was actually far from recovered. And I think that's an important thing for people to remember, is like, just because you've come so far doesn't mean you're just like magically fixed. And I just know now, like, it's, especially like for me, I don't think I was really fully recovered until probably like even through like 2020 into 2021, which is actually when like my performance really kicked off. And when I say that, it's like I was physically doing the right things, but my brain still wasn't quite right. So even though I was like, I still felt like I was fighting all these thoughts all the time. Even if I was giving myself the fuel I needed, but it was just really hard work all the time. Whereas now it's so freeing. It's like I can, I I don't overthink it anymore. I don't feel the guilt around it. Like there's no foods that I restrict. There's nothing that I don't have. I think that's a really big thing for me. Um, some people cut out things throughout the season. I don't do that because I know it's not right for me. Um, and yeah, so I think it's just been a long process. And no, I don't think I can necessarily give advice on how to do it because it's different for everyone. But I think the most important thing is you take it really slow, and you have to respect the trauma your body's been through. And just because maybe you're fueling right now doesn't mean that you're not still going to be feeling the effects of, you know, putting your body through that trauma for years before. Um, so I think it's just like, yeah, it's just you have to take it slow, and also like reach out for help when you do need it, because that was the hardest thing I ever did, and I'm so glad I did it, was getting help. Um, because I think there's just a lot of shame around it as well and things, and it's just really hard to take that step. So I would encourage people to, if they are, like even if you're questioning if you need help, you probably do. You know, if you're to that point where you're thinking about it, it's like it's something you probably should do. So yeah, so if anyone is listening who is like going through those things right now, so it's really hard to do it alone.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, wow, there's so much great stuff there. And I think, the point you make about shame is a really good one because, what essentially is going on is just some driven, hardworking, determined, women or men, people who want to do their best. And that's inadvertently leading them to kind of suffer these effects, which have a knock-on impact in taking them further away from what they want. And really, there isn't something to feel shame about there, because it's just kind of when drive becomes too much. And yeah, it definitely takes a lot to kind of reach out for help and make that step. And for you, how did you actually, take that step? How did you turn it from thinking about it to making it?
I mean, to be completely frank, I got to the point where I thought, like, I physically felt like I could not go on how I was going on, and I could not face a life feeling how I did. And when I got to that point, it was like I really knew something had to change. And I think that was the bigger. It wasn't necessarily about the running at that point. It wasn't about the injuries. It was just a pure like, I don't know how I could handle a life of this. Um, and fortunately, at the time, I mean, I did have some support through the university at the time, and they were very. They kept it all confidential and everything, which was a big thing for me at the time. And then saw some doctors there, and then they were able to refer me to people that were able to help. And I was very fortunate that I actually had a therapist who was a runner, who did get it, who had been through the same thing. And I think that was really helpful, because like for me, being told not to run, which is what they would have wanted to do, right? If when I went in for treatment, they basically said, they said, we would want you to be full inpatient care. And I refused at that point, because I was like, I have all these things to do in my life. I have this job, and I have this, I'm studying, and I want to run, and all these things. And I know for me, like being able to have like running was a coping mechanism for me in a way, and having that taken away, I think would have made things worse. So I think it was important for me to figure out a way to like work with my running, and work with, even if obviously when you are struggling with eating disorders, you don't actually want, no doctor's going to say, oh yes, have more expenditure, right? But for me, it was really important to kind of find my way to having like a really healthy relationship with running, and a healthy relationship with food, that beyond like actual my running career, just for life. Just knowing that, when I do retire, like I really want to be able to have a really healthy relationship with those things, where I don't feel burdened by either of them, or that I'm manipulating them for the wrong reasons, and all of those types of things. So yeah, I think, like I said, it's different for everyone, but that was a big one for me as well. Just being able to be in a setup that kind of respected the things that was actually like the things that were keeping me happy. It's still allowing me to do those, but still like on a path to recovery as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's really great to hear that you took those steps and you're able to go through it. And, it's definitely great that you've acknowledged that it is a hard time, because, for anyone who is going through something like that, I think it is good that these things don't get sugar-coated. And I guess, yeah, if we sort of bring it forward, actually, one last thing I wanted to touch on. You mentioned there how you thought you were recovered before, and it was only around kind of 2020, 2021 where you realized, actually, I am recovered. What would you say are maybe some of the differences between then and now that perhaps someone who is in a state of that, let's say, half recovery could look for and realize, okay, actually, I'm not quite there?
I mean, I think part of it was the intake, and part of it was the attitude around food, and also the overthinking. There was, I was always thinking about like what about food, and like not obsessing over it to a certain degree, but also then obsessing, like even if I did like consume what I needed to, then I would still be overthinking it before and afterwards. Certain foods I still wouldn't allow myself to buy, because I still had a lot of fear around certain foods, or fear that, for instance, if I bought something that I really liked, that I was going to not be able to have any self-control around that food, because I think when you go through cycles of restriction and things, it's still like very difficult. So then, but now having like the difference being having the freedom of, I can buy whatever I want, and not have any fear around like, oh, I'm going to lose control over this, or because there isn't a sense of restriction, and there is no sense of control around food. And it's like, I think control around other parts of my life as well. I think I kind of was latching on to a lot of different things at the time, which obviously isn't healthy, because there's so many things in life that you don't have control over. So it's like, once that control is taken away, then it's can put you in a whole spiral. So I think there was a lot of things around that, but the biggest thing of being like still having that obsession, and overthinking, you're overthinking kind of every meal still, or like eating out is really hard, and all of those types of things. Whereas now, like I said, I have that freedom to, like, I know I'm doing the right things for my fueling, for my running as well. But like, there's equally well, like I can have whatever I want in moderation, and not have any guilt or any fear or any yeah, it's just this freedom.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. And, if you are listening and you do feel like maybe thoughts of food do preoccupy you a lot, you think about it, then, maybe you do want to consider taking that step, or having a real think about, what you can do to find yourself in a position of freedom. And so I guess if we move things over to Virginia now, you take up a pro contract, you've come out of university, you sort of starting to work through some of the issues that were maybe holding you back there. Can you talk us through maybe how your running changed and what it was like becoming a pro athlete after being in college?
Yeah, I think it was difficult for me at times to get used to it, in the sense of when I decided to go pro, I decided to let's go completely pro, and I need to get a feel for like what this life is like without having anything else um, kind of exhausting me and taking away my energy. I learned through that process that I'm one of those people that actually do need something else um, to kind of balance out my life. So that running isn't my be all end all. Like I love running and I love what I do, and I'm going to put my heart and soul into it. But I am one of those people that I need to be able to have a little space to be able to get the most out of myself. I need to provide that space between me and running, just so I don't. Um, yeah, so it doesn't take over my life in an unhealthy way. Um, but yeah, so that was a bit of a process figuring out, okay, what kind of energy levels do I have when I'm running? Because obviously the focus is on recovery. You need to make sure you're doing all the right things. Like it's weird having a job where like having a nap is part of your job. It's a bit of a strange one. So yeah, there was a bit of a process there. But as I mentioned before, when I was out in Virginia, I was able to stay healthy, and so I was able to get the consistency. So my mileage gradually increased in a very safe way. We did it in a very safe way, but yeah, that increased. My training was different. I was with a different coach at the time, so there was definitely huge differences there, and pretty big differences in terms of climate and training and that sort of thing. But yeah, I would say it was a good group to be a part of at the time, just because there was, in many ways, there were similarities to what I was doing before. It was just kind of on a higher level, and then also the intensity of, the race seasons are different. There is a huge amount of intensity in the NCAA system, but it was just a new process for me, being able, like, starting to say, okay, these are the ones we need to focus on, but we're picking races now versus all through the NCAA. It's like you just go to whatever races your team goes to, and then I'd run NCAA championships, and then I'd try and do whatever, like, under 23s or whatever under 20s champs was happening that year. So it was almost like tagged on the end of it. Whereas now, as a pro, like the senior championships were just at the forefront of what I was doing. And so it kind of, my whole year shifted a little bit.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And so when you talk about sort of process, finding that new normal with all the change that's gone on, what did you kind of do to, I guess, balance out your life a bit more?
Yeah, so I got involved with some things locally. I taught some classes at local treadmill studio, who I knew the owners of, did some things like that, and then eventually, actually, I started my MBA. Um, when especially like basically early in 2020, I realized I wasn't going to be traveling, and it was kind of a prime time to do it. So yeah, so it's kind of the second, a bit over a year and a half into it, I started my MBA, took advantage of that time to do that. And then, yeah, that basically took me to the beginning of the Olympic year as well. And then obviously was traveling quite a lot during that year. And then, yeah, I can dial back in again to that. Um, but yeah, I am one of those people who I find having something on the side, having even a like part-time position or something like that, it just helps balance out your life a little bit and gives me something to focus on. I kind of use my brain a bit. I think, like, obviously we use our body so much, and there is a certain amount, like, you need the concentration, you are tired in those ways, but it is nice to not feel like my brain is just atrophying while I'm running. Yeah, it's like you kind of want to challenge myself in different ways. So yeah, I always find that when I have something else, I'm usually happier and more balanced. And like I said, I kind of thrive off of like the different structure. Um, but equally well, it is hard to maintain another like job when you are traveling quite a lot and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, go mad in your own head or be a bit stressed with overcommitment, but a bit more sane at the same time. And I guess that leads us into, 2021, that Olympic year. You say you made that decision, you came back. Can you talk us through that coming back to the UK, the new setup, how things changed. And I mean, you also, you know, won the European Indoor Championships over 3,000 as well.
Yeah, so I was still living in Virginia at the time in 2021. I spent quite a lot of the year in the UK in the sense of like, obviously with championships and things like that, and based myself out the UK quite a lot. But yeah, I had a really successful indoor season in the end. I was quite a bit of a slow start to the indoor season, but I got in really good shape and had went to European Championships and honestly outperformed what people probably expected of me at the time. I didn't go into that as a medal contender, um, and but like I knew that I was in a position where I was capable of doing that. And then it was almost like once I did that, I kind of really made me feel like Tokyo is possible. Tokyo is really, really possible now. Um, I think I struggle a bit time trialing, time trial style races, which is kind of with the standards, like getting standards. Like I'm a good racer. I'm not necessarily good just chasing times, and it's one of the things that have kind of encouraged me to go towards the roads. Is I'm tired of time trialing on the track to try and chase standards. It's not fun for me. Like personally, that's not the fun part, and I think it's really hard if it takes you a few times to get it right. It's like your season's like big chunk of the season's gone already, and then you haven't actually had a chance to do the bit that you really love. Um, so yeah, I think I spent quite a lot of time like just trying to get that standard. And then yeah, it was quite a up and down season in a way because I was, I think I can't remember now, like 0.3 of a second off the 10K time or something like that. At the time. So I was so close to the 10K time. Didn't have another opportunity to go get it. And then I actually only like I finally got the 5K time, and then found out like 2 days before the Olympic trials that the time wasn't ratified because someone had put in a complaint about the placement of the cones on the bend, um, which was a bit ridiculous because I legitimately ran a time at a certified meet and all these things, and obviously somebody I don't know what people could have gained or who had something to gain by putting that complaint in. But for it obviously changed the way that I ran the trials, because the big plan was just to sit and kick, which I knew I was very capable of doing, because I had a lot of foot speed at that point, and then I had to take it out from the get-go to try and run the time again. But yeah, fortunately the time was ratified and everything, but it was a bit hard in the sense of I didn't know until like the following day that it had been ratified in time for selection. So yeah, when I crossed the line of the trials, I didn't get that moment of feeling like I made an Olympic team. I got the feeling of I've done everything I was supposed to do, and I've still not made the team. Because yeah, like it's when you get top two at the trials, like and you've got the time, there's this moment that kind of I felt like was taken away from me a little bit. But at the end of the day, the important thing was I was there, and yeah, it was a bit of an up and down season in a way. Like I had some really high moments, but the moments that I really, really believed that it was possible, and I really, really believed that I deserved to be there. But there was also moments of this frustration of like when I was in, like I had a couple 5K races that really just didn't go well. And there was like I felt like I was beating my head against the wall a little bit. So it wasn't as smooth sailing as you might have liked in an Olympic year. But at the end of the day, it was really rewarding when it all came together, and then like ended up PBing on the day when I was there in Tokyo. And I think at the time, like I wanted more. I got ninth in my heat, and yeah, I like obviously wanted to qualify for that final, but at the same time, it's like I PB'd in 99% humidity with it being blazing hot, so I couldn't really like I couldn't even though I was a bit dissatisfied at the time. In retrospect, I was like I gave it everything I had on the day, and yeah, I couldn't have really expected more than that.
No, definitely not. And I mean, humidity cannot be underestimated. Having lived in a very humid country myself, it really does have a huge impact on performance and how you feel as well, for one. But yeah, it's a shame to hear about that moment kind of being almost taken from you there, with kind of that lack of clarity around the whole selection and is it, isn't it? Definitely is difficult when even the selection itself is sometimes not particularly clear cut. And so can you talk us through, though, that moment when you did find out you were going to the Olympics, and what the build up was like going there, and maybe how you were feeling leading into that race?
Yeah, I think well, it was actually funny at the time. I remember we were waiting for selection calls to come through, and it was getting really quite late. Um, and I was like, "Oh no!" And so my family was then trying to distract me by playing Scrabble. And actually, weirdly enough, when I got the phone call, I had the word. I literally my letters spelled Britain. And I was like, it was, yeah, it was a weird moment. And then the phone rang.
Wow.
And then it was actually my Rob Denmark, who's now my coach, was the one who gave me that call. So to let me know I'm with the team. And yeah, it was a bit surreal at that point because I talked myself out of it the whole day. I was like to almost have really low expectations and just coming to terms with the fact that it's not going to happen. Um, so yeah, it was a surreal moment, and then from then on, I mean, it was a bit of a whirlwind really because you go like next day I was at kitting out in Birmingham, and then like not too long later, we were out in the holding camp because obviously it was quite a long holding camp because of COVID, but also we were in Tokyo, so they brought it out there pretty early. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. I know it was obviously I don't have a point of reference, but I know it was obviously very different than what a normal Olympics would look like. But I don't think it didn't take away from the value of that. And honestly, some of the friends that like on that team as well, like I'm still like really, really good friends with. And yeah, I mean, it's just obviously an amazing experience. I do wish I kind of soaked it in a little bit more at the time, because I think it's really easy to make a team and then just think, oh yeah, well, like if I've made this one, like I definitely can make Paris. Like it's just, I know it doesn't work like that, but in the back of your brain, that's I think where when you're running really well, it's easy to think that there's always another one down the line. Um, but yeah, no, it was very very special, and yeah, I mean, like I said, it was a bit like in some ways it was really surreal, but in other ways it was a goal I'd had for a long time. So um, yeah, it's hard to describe.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, when you sort of want something for so long and it's made to be such a kind of pinnacle moment, it can be really difficult to digest what's going on around you and really contextualize the value of it at the time. And yeah, you make, such a great point. Running and being a professional athlete is so, I guess, unreliable in some respects. You never do know quite what's around the corner, and that's what makes it so exciting. But, from your guys' perspective, what adds that layer of, I guess, unpredictability and a challenge in some respects. And a lot of people talk about the post-Olympic come down. Is that something that you experienced?
Um, I think in some ways yes, in some ways no. I think when you have it as a goal for the long time and everyone builds up the Olympics as this massive thing, which it is. I'm not saying it isn't, and I'm not undermining it in any way. Like it was extremely special, and it's an incredible time in my life. But you go to the Olympics and you expect it to change you in a way. You almost expect like it's going to absolutely change my life, and then you get home and nothing's really changed. And I think like it doesn't fix any problems. It doesn't fix anything. Yes, it can present like a huge opportunity financially for people and that sort of thing, depending on what your event you're in and all that. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change who you are. And I think there's it's a weird feeling coming home and just being like, okay, I just did this like really big amazing thing, and I'm just not. You come home and everything's the same. Um, so yeah, I think there was a bit of a weird experience there, and then also just I think in some ways it added a bit of pressure the following year as well, um, because and it was in the sense of the fact that I just started I went to a lot of different championships in a row. Um, And I think once I started getting championship after championship, just like through 2021 to 2022, like 2022 alone, I went to 5 championships, and um, I think that was that was the pressure of like that expectation, on not from anyone else, but on myself, that I was, I was like, oh, okay, did that one, like I'm going to do the next one as well. Um, yeah, I think that builds up in a way, and I think there was a lot of like internal pressure after that. So I don't know if that was it wasn't necessarily the Olympics that caused that. I think it was just then, you know, um, having success the following year as well. You just start to, I don't want to say take it for granted, because like I really do value all the experiences and things, but there's a small part of you that just is always looking to the next thing.
Mm. I think you make an excellent point there. Nothing in life really, well, very few things in life really are actually, so much more valuable than anything else. And it is easy. And I think it applies to a lot of things actually, that the only thing that can ever change you and your outlook is you. And that can only come from you. And as much as it seems, especially in, I think, the world we live in, that external factors can kind of help bring us what we're looking for. It really does always have to come from within. And yeah, 2022, I mean, you took the UK Indoor Championships title in the 3000, you raced at the World Athletics Championships, World Cross Country Championships, Diamond Leagues, Commonwealth Games, European Championships. The variety alone is quite a lot. What was sort of going through, I guess, I don't know, your mind? What were your goals that season? And also, you came back to the UK. How did your setup change?
Yeah, I think it was a very big year. Goals were, of course, main ones for outdoors, looking at world championships and Commonwealths. Um, like I said earlier, my unfortunately I had like my indoor season didn't go as well as I wanted it to. Obviously, I won the British Championships. Made the indoor team. Fortunately, got COVID at indoors. Didn't realize I had COVID, and then wondered why I raced so badly until after the race when I found out. But yeah, I think that was a tough one. And then obviously, as I mentioned before, Worlds didn't go as well as I wanted to. So just bouncing back from that, actually, I kind of, I think I peaked a little too soon. Yeah, because around the time of the Rabat Diamond League, like I was just in amazing shape during that race, and I ended up taking second that day, and I had a really strong race, and I really like probably one of the gutsiest races I've done, in terms of fact of like nobody was looking at me before that race thinking that she was going to take like that. I took the lead with a 400 to go. Objectively, I had no business doing that, but like I was felt so good that I like didn't have any fear with it. And I really think that time, like around that time, like I was in about 1440 shape. Um, Fortunately, it was a bit early. Smashed the British champs, but then by the time champs came round, I felt like I was starting to struggle a little bit. And I think part of that was also knowing I had the like my intending move. Really, like I went to world champs, and then that was it. Kind of just left Virginia, and they kind of slept on sofas for a while. Not well, just like sharing with family and friends helped me out. So yeah, and figuring out what I was doing is quite a big time. For a lot of the summer, I was kind of self-coached in the way that like my old coach was setting sessions, but not the rest of the week. I think which added to the fact that I got quite stale, because I was basically setting my mileage and everything in between. But yeah, and then through the end of the summer, then Rob Denmark, who now coaches me, he started helping me a bit as well, just in terms of executing my sessions and things like that. So I did have some support, but it wasn't as I don't think my season wasn't structured in a way that really helped me perform at the championships when I really really needed to. Um, but yeah, and then I started officially working with Rob. I think September October that year, and then completely changed my setup. Settled in Loughborough, and then yeah, that's kind of where I've been ever since.
No, lovely. That's great to hear, and it seems like that's working out well for you, which is always really good to hear. And so I guess, a bit conscious of time now, if we kind of move forwards into 2023, 2024, your new setup, what's kind of changed for you in recent years? And, you didn't run at the British trial or British Olympic trials this year, but I would assume that would have potentially been a goal at some time. So can you sort of talk us through the next 2 years and bring us into where we are now?
Yeah, last year was a tough one for me. Like I did end up making the world team, um, but I threw quite a lot of injuries. I cracked my disc early in the year, and nothing. It wasn't like anything major, but I had a string of just smaller things. Got really ill several times. A bit gross, but I basically I cut up my foot in a race and ended up getting infected, and it was like infected for like a month, which really impacted my ability to wear shoes. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was just it was things like that. It wasn't like I had any catastrophic injuries where like I was breaking bones, but um, it was just a lot of things that were quite disruptive, which was a shame because obviously I was really happy with my setup and I really had a lot of faith in the work I was doing with Rob and everything. Um, but yeah, and I went through a lot of like personal changes as well, a lot of life changes that just, kind of drains you a bit. So obviously last year was a bit difficult, and then going into this year as well, we made the decision to focus on the 5K, mostly because I was closest to the time, which I think was where I went wrong. I think I should have chosen the event that I really was enjoying the training for and really enjoyed what I wanted to do. And I think, um, yeah, I like went out to LA to run the 10 early in the season, um, got ill, didn't run that well. And I think that's when we went, okay, let's just really focus on the 5. And I think that's kind of was my first mistake, because I should have probably dialed into the thing that I was really loving doing and given it another go. Um, but yeah, to as a short answer for why I didn't run the trials, with the 5K this year, I've just been beating my head against the wall. My training, I've been in really good shape, but then my training hasn't really translated to 5K. Even the training that we're doing, I've just been struggling on that anaerobic side. Really feeling amazing in my heart, like that half marathon work, that 10K work, those long reps, all of that, feeling so strong, so good. And then just really struggling on this kind of speed side of it and getting that VO2 max work. I was struggling with kind of a bit. Um, and at the end of the day, just wasn't enjoying it that much. And like I said, I felt like I was just beating my head against the wall. And me and my coach, we made the decision of like, if we don't like, you don't have the standard, and at the end of the day, I like didn't want to run the trials. And I know it sounds really, really bad. It was a hard time for me to make that decision, in the sense that like I felt like I was giving up on a goal that I had for a really long time. Paris was a goal for a very long time, but it was one of those things where, just in terms of prioritizing myself and my well-being, I had to kind of let go of that a little bit and just think, okay, well, yes, just because like I failed at one thing doesn't mean I'm not going to succeed at another. And um, there was definitely times earlier this year where I thought, do I just retire? Like, is that why isn't this clicking? Is it just me? Like, do I just not have it anymore? Do I just not have that spark for racing? And I kind of wondered, do I walk away? And then I kind of realized, I was like, actually, there's this event that I can do that involves all the things that I love. Like all the things that I've been thriving off of right now have been like long runs and thresholds and long reps, and like those longer sessions where you're just having it absorb off a short rest, where you're just having it absorb rep after rep after rep. Those are the things that I've really loved doing. And I kind of realized, I was like, wait a second, on the roads, like if I'm doing 5K, or sorry, 10K and half marathons and up to the marathon, like that's the kind of stuff I'm going to be doing. Um, and I kind of felt like, yeah, I still have a lot to give the sport, and I think I owe it to myself to kind of keep trying. And as long as there's a way that I can do it, which I find is really fulfilling. And that's kind of the reason we walked away. And I think making the decision of I'm going to do what I want to do, versus what people expect me to do. And so I think that like I said, I think that's kind of where we went wrong earlier in the year. It's definitely something I've thought about before, but I think just how I was feeling throughout all my sessions this year and everything really compounded that. So yeah, so now I'm kind of going on the roads. I've called it a kind of a soft retirement from track, in the sense of like, if I suddenly had the itch next year to do a track 10K or something, I'm not saying I won't, but right now I don't have the itch to do that. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like I'm just being really open to where it kind of takes me, and like I said before, just picking the races that I really want to do, and picking the things that I feel fulfilling, and also taking control of the structure of my year. Um, Typically with track season, you do like camp, altitude camp in January, and then indoor season, then altitude camp April, and then have this really intense outdoor season, and then you take a bit of a break, and then you just winter training, and it starts all over again. The exciting thing about roads is you can actually structure when those big builds are going to be, when's the big marathon going to be, when's your break going to be, what halves do you really want to focus on, and then we can fill in around that. So it's kind of a bit freeing in a way of like I actually get to structure my season and stuff how I want to. So I'm quite excited for that as well.
No, that sounds really exciting. And, it sounds like a bit of a switch from kind of a more outcome orientated approach to a more of a process driven approach. And also, I think that it is so important to make sure you're enjoying what you're doing, you're happy. That's a real contrast to how you were feeling going into Tokyo, when you were feeling really positive about things. And yeah, there's definitely so much merit in, when you come to that last page, close the book, or when you come to the last chapter, stop there for now and pick it up later or something. So that's so exciting to hear. I guess then moving forwards, you talk about kind of enjoying some of the longer sessions a bit more. What would you say at the moment is kind of a key session for you, or something you found a lot of benefit in that maybe only come to your attention more recently?
Yeah, I think I think there's benefits from a lot of different sessions we do. But in terms of the sessions that I thrive off of and I look forward to now, are probably not the sessions that I used to thrive off of. They're the sessions that used to scare me. So yeah, just if we're doing lots of mile reps or 2K reps, or like this past Saturday, did a bit of a session that scared me. We were with Sam Harrison, who's now joined a group, and which is great for me. Now I'm seeing him going on the roads. But we did this like a 1K, we did 1K, 2K, 3K, 2K, 1K on the track, and they were quite spicy for the length of the reps, I would say. So things like that. Like I find that I constantly surprise myself. Beforehand, I'm always a bit on edge, thinking, Rob, you might have been a bit ambitious with these times, but I'll give it a go. And without fail, he's always right. Like I can always do it. And I think those ones for me are really, really rewarding, because obviously they're painful, but when you can kind of grapple with those long reps and then and surprise yourself with the times, well, it's just really, really rewarding.
Yeah, no, definitely it sounds like it. And yeah, sometimes it's just about giving yourself a new challenge, a clean slate. And for you, I guess if you sort of reflect back on your time to this point, is there something that you wish you'd known younger, or wish that you'd started doing sooner?
I mean, I think we talked about that a lot earlier. I
Yeah.
wish I healed right. And I wish I trusted my body and appreciated that what makes me fast is the fact that I'm really, really strong. And I think that's the biggest one. And then, like I mentioned before, just like really like enjoying like every single race that you do have the opportunity to do. And not just the races, but also just the whole process. Like it's the people that you get to meet in this sport and that you get to work with. Like it is just an amazing experience. I think it's nice when you can really appreciate that.
Yeah, no, definitely great to hear. Okay, and let's wrap this up with some quick fire fun. So, reading or watching?
Uh, Although watching this week because I've been watching the new House of Dragon series.
Ooh, nice. Okay, sweet or sour?
Probably sour. I'm more of a savory person than a sweet person. So,
Yeah, I'm with you there. Hot or cold?
oh, just in general, or just
Yeah, temperature wise.
temperature wise, I'd say hot because I run very cold.
Oh, so you're cold when you run?
Yeah, I just like have no circulation in my hands and feet.
Could be benefits to that, with
Yeah.
climate change, you'll be thriving. Stay in or go out?
Probably stay in. I'm not really. I go either way. It varies from day to day.
Nice. Good to have a bit of both in there. Are you crop top or vest?
Crop top.
Crop top. Spikes or flats?
I have to say flats now. I'm
Oh
on the road.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have to say flats.
Have you got a favourite shoe at the moment?
Yeah, so for the flats, the new on flats that they just released are amazing. I'm a big fan of the on flats. I mean, I know I'm supposed to say that because they pay me, but like I genuinely, if I was saying this in an unbiased way, they're top notch. But yeah, but the Hyper Monster trainers as well do a lot of work in those at the moment. They're great.
Nice. I mean, that's an awesome name for some shoes. So definitely
Yeah.
get yourself a pair of them. Tea or coffee?
Drink both, but probably coffee.
Coffee. Okay. That seems to be the long time winner. And most random sport you've been supporting this Olympics?
Oh, I've watched a bit of everything, to be honest. I've never really watched the show jumping before. Got kind of into that this time. I don't understand the scoring, but I enjoyed watching it.
Nice, nice. Yeah, no, there's some complicated ones. I know one of the velodrome ones I was watching where they're like crawling along, tagging each other. I don't know what was going on, but yeah, that's great to hear. Okay, no, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on. Really inspiring story. I'm sure so many people listening will be able to learn a lot, take away a lot from this one, and wish you all the best with the roads, then that marathon. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This really helps to get the content out there. And I want to make this podcast the best possible for you. So go follow Fitter, Faster, Happier on Instagram. That's Fitter, Faster, Happier to leave your questions, comments, and feedback, and for updates and guest requests. All the best for the week ahead, guys. Run happy, live happy, be happy.